knowledge, your experience. Also give us like concrete sort of examples of what has happened on the ground, what are some of the errors, so that everybody can learn from each other. So that's the idea of this session. So once Diksha starts, we'll do a round of introductions as well. So Diksha, over to you.
Thanks, Pooja. I'll just quickly introduce myself and then maybe we can do a my own
Diksha, use the mic.
Use the mic.
Okay, not loud enough. Hello? Yes, there is a. Okay, I'll try. You want to try this one? Hello? Yeah, it's I can be louder.
Hello, 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 hello. Just
Hello. Yes. Okay, great. So, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'm Diksha. I work with LEAD, which is a research center housed at the Institute for Financial Management and Research, and also now Kriya University, which is a new university under IFMR Society. IFMR has been working in the space of inclusive finance and small business development for a while now, and our research center as well has been in this space for over 17 years. Mainly working with financial service providers, with policymakers on testing innovative solutions. And we've had the fortune to partner with, some of the institutions here as well in really testing innovative solutions focused on inclusive finance, so focused on underserved segments, from we're looking at women entrepreneurs, we're looking at rural segments, we're looking at now gig workers, migrants, and so on. So there's a whole spectrum of segments that we work across, both in rural and urban areas. In 2022, we had the opportunity to collaborate with ABPN and JP Morgan on this study to understand the landscape of women entrepreneurs in peri-urban and urban areas specifically. Because while there is a lot of evidence and knowledge about the rural landscape, we are missing a few pieces in the urban space. So who are the enterprises? What are the characteristics like? What is the size of these businesses? Because as we know, while there is this, MSME categorization, most of these enterprises, would not even fall under the micro category in terms of turnover. So we're really looking at nano enterprises, but that do have, a significant growth potential as well as employment potential. So while we did this study, we had a convening early in September to not just look at what are the challenges from an access to finance perspective, but how do we come together to look at some solutions, and then specifically the role of philanthropy in this. So while there is, of course, a market for financial services out there, there are financial institutions, conventional players, but how do we really leverage philanthropic funding to bridge some of these gaps? And that's the goal of today's discussion. Before we jump into that, I think it's fitting to really hear from an entrepreneur, and we're going to center this discussion really, starting from the voice of an entrepreneur. So we have with us today Rupali Tai. Rupali Shinde, she's an entrepreneur from Haswad, Maharashtra. She started her journey with crafts business, and she's best placed to talk about that. It's a business that makes musical instruments with leather, and today it employs over 10 women, and they supply across the country. They're also retailing on Amazon, and they have the capacity to fulfill over 2,000 orders per month. It's an inspiring story, but there have been challenges, and Rupali will walk us through how she raised the seed capital and how what institutions did she reach out to for funding and what the journey looked like. So I'm going to pass the mic to her. वेलकम रूपाली ताई, हमारे साथ जुड़ने के लिए आज बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद और अपना अनुभव शेयर करने के लिए. आपने अपना बिजनेस कैसे स्टार्ट किया और इसमें क्या क्या कठिनाई आई, इसके बारे में हमें थोड़ा बताएंगे.
नमस्ते, मैं रूपाली मसवड़ से हूँ. महाराष्ट्र में सातारा जिला में मसवड़ करके एक छोटा गांव है और वहाँ से मैं हूँ. वहाँ पर एक ऐसा मानदेशी का हमारा मैं मानदेशी से हूँ, वो भी मैं बताना चाहती हूँ. मानदेशी फाउंडेशन है और मैं मेरी थोड़ी सी जर्नी आपको बताना चाहूँगी कि मैं एक किसान की बेटी हूँ और 14 साल की उम्र में ही मेरी शादी हो गई. 10th मैंने पास किया और मेरी शादी हो गई। जैसे कि क्या होता है कि रूरल एरिया में मेरी 4 बहनें हैं, तो जल्दी जल्दी शादी कर देते हैं। अभी मुझे मेरी शादी को 22 ईयर्स हो गए हैं, तो मेरे बच्चे भी बहुत बड़े हैं। तो शादी हो गई और मुझे बहुत ऐसा लग रहा था कि मुझे खुद कुछ करना चाहिए। बच्चे हो गए, लेकिन मैं ऐसी शांत नहीं बैठी रही इधर और सारी महिलाएं की तरह। लेकिन मुझे क्या करूँ, अभी मेरा एजुकेशन भी इतना नहीं है, तो मुझे क्या करना चाहिए। तो मेरे हस्बैंड का लेदर का बिजनेस था, जैसे कि वो पर्स लेदर बनाते हैं ना, उनका पारंपरिक बिजनेस था। लेकिन मैं उस बिजनेस में उनको मदद करती थी, लेकिन मेरे पास कुछ ऐसा पैसे मुझे नहीं मिलते थे। तो मैंने सोचा कि मेरा खुद का अलग कुछ होना चाहिए, मेरी पहचान होनी चाहिए। तो मैंने वो म्यूजिकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट एक मंदिर में देखा। उस इंस्ट्रूमेंट पर जो लेदर लगा हुआ था वो मेरे कारखाने में तैयार हो रहा था, और वो उसकी प्राइस मैंने देखी तो वो बहुत महंगी थी। तो मैंने सोचा चलो क्यों ना यही बिज़नेस हम स्टार्ट करते हैं। तो मैंने वो बिज़नेस हस्बैंड से पूछा, उनका सपोर्ट भी था, तो उन्होंने बोला ठीक है कर लो। लेकिन अभी बिज़नेस स्टार्ट करना है तो बहुत सारा नॉलेज होना चाहिए, पहला तो पैसे होने चाहिए हमारे पास। और मैं अपनी खुद की पहचान करना चाहती थी, तो मुझे घर से कुछ भी एक भी रुपया नहीं चाहिए था। तो मैंने बैंक में, बहुत सारी बैंक में अप्लाई किया कि मुझे कम से कम 10,000 तो मुझे दे दीजिए। लेकिन किसी ने नहीं, मुझे लोन वगैरह कुछ नहीं दिया। लेकिन मानदेशी बैंक है, वो महिलाओं की बैंक है हमारी। मेरी इंट्रोडक्शन पहली बार उनके साथ वही हुई और मुझे उन्होंने 20,000 का लोन दे दिया। तो मैंने अभी लोन लिया, रॉ मटेरियल वगैरह मंगा लिया, और मैंने अभी सोचा कि चलो बिज़नेस स्टार्ट करते हैं, अभी मुझे पैसा भी आना शुरू हो जाएगा। लेकिन मैं गलत थी, मुझे बिज़नेस का कुछ नॉलेज ही नहीं था, और वो म्यूज़िकल इंस्ट्रूमेंट मुझे बनाना ही नहीं आता था। लेकिन 1 महीने के बाद तो मुझे बैंक के हफ्ते शुरू हो गए, वो रीपेड मुझे करना चाहिए ना। तो मैंने कुछ, मेरे पास नहीं था, मेरा बिज़नेस ही स्टार्ट नहीं हुआ, मुझे वो बनाना नहीं आता था। मेरे पास 2 वर्कर थे, वो मुझे सिखा नहीं रहे थे। वो बोल रहे थे कि आपको हम सिखाएंगे तो आप खुद चालू करेंगे और हमें निकाल दोगी। वो भी मुझे छोड़कर चले गए। मैं बहुत परेशान हो गई, अभी क्या करे। तो और ये बिज़नेस महिला नहीं करती है, क्योंकि ये बिज़नेस तो जेंट्स का होता है। तो मुझे कम्युनिटी से भी बहुत सारी ऐसी महिला होती है कि ऐसी मेंटली मुझे टॉर्चर करने लगी, क्या बिज़नेस करने निकली, और कोई महिला, कोई एक महिला बिज़नेस कर सकती है क्या, ये तो पुरुषों का काम है, ऐसा। तो मुझे बहुत, मैं भी सैड होकर ऐसे, चलो अभी बिज़नेस नहीं करना है, बैंक का लोन भी मुझे चुकाना है, तो मैं ये जो रॉ मटेरियल है वो बेच देती हूँ, जितना भी पैसा आता है वो बैंक का लोन चुका देती हूँ। हस्बैंड ने भी कहा ठीक है, एक बार तुमने ट्राई करके देखा, अभी जो आपको करना है करो। लेकिन मानदेशी में एक ऐसा ही सेशन था देशी MBA का, मैंने वो ज्वाइन किया, और उसमें मुझे इतनी अच्छी तरह से वहाँ पर सीख मिली कि बिज़नेस कैसा करना चाहिए, क्या करना चाहिए। तो उसी हिसाब से मैंने ठान लिया कि नहीं, जब तक मुझे आता नहीं तब तक मैं वहाँ पर करती रहूँगी, ट्राई करती रहूँगी। जितनी बार मैं फेल होती हूँ ठीक है, मैं कुछ सीख लूँगी। 6 महीने के बाद मैं सक्सेस हो गई और मेरा बिज़नेस स्टार्ट हो गया। लेकिन मुझे एक अभी ये लोन तो लिया था, एक लोन चुकाने के लिए मुझे दूसरा लोन लेना पड़ा। जैसे कि मैंने गोल्ड लोन ले लिया, और वो पहला लोन मैंने चुकता कर दिया, क्योंकि मैं नहीं चाहती थी कि मेरा सिबिल कुछ ख़राब हो जाए। पहली बार में ही मेरा अगर सिबिल ख़राब हो जाएगा तो मुझे दूसरा बड़ा लोन नहीं मिलेगा ना। तो मैंने गोल्ड लोन ले लिया और वो चुकता कर दिया। 6 महीने के बाद मेरा बिज़नेस स्टार्ट हो गया, और मैंने अभी लोन रीपे करना शुरू कर दिया। बाद में मुझे 40,000 का मिला, 1 लाख रुपए का मिला लोन। अभी मुझे बहुत अच्छी तरह से मेरा बिज़नेस भी स्टार्ट है। मैंने दूसरी 7-8 महिलाओं को भी काम दे दिया, और वो महिला भी अभी बहुत अच्छी तरह से बिज़नेस को मेरे बढ़ा रही है। और अभी मेरे ऑल इंडिया से मुझे ऑर्डर आती है मेरे प्रोडक्ट को, जैसे कि ढोल डमरू सब कुछ ऐसा, और ऑनलाइन भी मेरे प्रोडक्ट बहुत सारे अच्छी तरह से जाते हैं।
Thank you, Rupali Tai. In all the excitement to listen to her, I think I missed asking everybody to introduce. So if we can still do that very quickly, would that be okay? If we can just do a quick round of introductions, and then we'll come back to Rupali Tai and also hear your reflections on what she's sharing.
Hello everyone, I'm Sanjana Mohanty. I'm from the Self-Employed Women's Association Seva Bharat. It's one of the many Seva institutions across the country. I lead their advocacy efforts as well as a program on collective social enterprises at Seva Bharat. Really nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Sarita. I represent Bayer or Bayer, whatever you wish to pronounce it as. I look after CSR for South Asia and I lead the foundation for India.
Dr. Akhil Shahani, I run the Shahani Group, which is a diversified education group. Along with the colleges, we have a foundation that helps a lot of underprivileged kids get jobs in the corporate world, supported by some good partners of ours. But I think my ticket to being allowed on this table is the fact that we've recently absorbed Unlimited India, an incubator for startup social entrepreneurs in the group. And we have a cohort of startup women social entrepreneurs starting next month. And I think a lot of the issues that you're talking about here, I think we would love to learn from and maybe give some of our inputs as what we've experienced.
Hello everyone, I am Veena Lakhwani from Finex Investments. I'm the AVP of a social division there, and the main purpose of the division of Finex Investments, of the social division, is to connect impact funders to the organizations, the organizations that really are in need of funds, be it microfinance institutions or any such organizations that are focused on women basically. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Shachi Kaul. I work as Director of HR and CSR for Mizuho Bank. But my ticket to this roundtable is not from Mizuho Bank, which I've joined just this week. I worked with women entrepreneur programs in RBL Bank. When we were there, we support देशी MBA को हम support करते हैं. आप हमारी success story भी रह चुके हो. I'm going to use RBL Bank and Mizuho Bank because I think this week I belong to both, in that sense. But I will, when we start sharing, recite all of that. But that's my introduction.
Hi, good meeting everyone. I am Chakravati. I lead India operations for Upaya. We are an impact investment firm. So 50% of our current portfolio are women-led, and on top of it, 50% of the jobs that we have created, which is our core investment thesis, are also for women. So 28,000 odd jobs created, 34 enterprises funded in low-income or aspirational districts of India. So that's in short about our work.
Hi, this is Manish Thakkar from Avanti Finance. We are a NBFC as well as NBFC MFI, providing loans to basically rural India through a technology platform. Our model is how do we use the confluence of technology and communities to put together to administer financial services, starting with credit as the product. Currently, 90% of our borrowers are women, but we operate in rural area where it is very common for, because of the microfinance and various products that exist. So 90% of our borrowers are women. We struggle to find good partners and good cohorts to lend to women in the urban and the semi-urban areas. So that's something that would love to learn from here. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Matilda. I lead the CSR strategy for IndusInd Bank. My ticket to be on this panel is that we are working on aspirational districts of India, and we have decided 5 districts pan-India, and we'll be working very closely with women, right? And across even our portfolio on strategic interventions, women cuts across, every aspect of our programs. So going forward, we'll be working very closely with women collectives. We will look at how, farm produce, you can have an FPO there. And so financing becomes very critical because CSR can only go a little way in terms of grant funding, right? How can we stretch it with a blended finance or a financing opportunity there is what, we are looking at going forward.
Hi everyone, I'm Arvind. I'm part of the AVPN team. I lead our thematic collaborations across Asia.
I'm Rupa. I'm also from IndusInd, like Matilda. Since Matilda is representing the CSR side, I thought I will discuss more the business part of financing women. Of course, Mandeshi is very close to me. I've been there and stayed with चेतना ताई. मैं आपसे मिली हूँ शायद पता नहीं, पर मैं रह चुकी हूँ चेतना जी के साथ उनके घर में. So we have IndusInd Bank is a very has a very large portfolio of microfinance, which is focused on women. Close to 25,000 crore is the portfolio size. And recently, we are also exploring. That's the typical joint lending model. But we are, so we are going a little above that now, looking at kirana shops set up by women entrepreneurs and trying to finance that. Doing an experiment there with USAID supported platforms. This one by Revive, yeah, USAID support. So we're doing a collab and seeing how that will work. It's an experiment. And I'm also setting up for urban and semi-urban women a platform for financing women entrepreneurs and taking them like an incubator, supporting their learning, supporting financing, equity, debt, the whole lot, and as well as providing them market connects and incubator and accelerator supports. So these are part of the businesses of the bank, and it's not connected with CSR.
Good afternoon, everyone. Rajarshi Dattabarwa. I'm part of MSc, Microsafe Consulting. I lead a small team that focuses on MSMEs, MSME finance and entrepreneurship development, among others. Look forward to a very enriching discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Saurabh from JP Morgan. I lead CSR for JP Morgan in India. I think as is evident from the focus of the session, we are helping women-owned enterprises scale up, grow is one of the key focus areas for us at JP Morgan, besides skilling for youth as well as financial inclusion. Big thank you to all of you. The idea for us is to learn from your perspectives as we've been working on this. I'm sure Diksha will share more about the research, and some of you were there on the earlier convening that we did in September. And I think what Rupali Tai shared today is kind of sums up the critical challenge we've been facing as we fund various projects through grants. The interconnection between abilities to skill, but without solving for access to finance, you don't see the businesses growing. So I think her story pretty well captures that, and that was the intent and agenda. Today we did want to focus specifically on access to finance because we feel unless you solve for that, the business would not grow, right? You may be able to skill. So excited to hear perspectives from all of you on what have been different experiences today. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Sumit Chauhan from RBL Bank. I manage CSR at the bank. Got in a little late, but I'm just catching the drift. I think the focus is going to be really very clear, being a little philosophical. We just surpassed China, right? 1.4 billion, that's who we are. And if it's going to be India's decade, it's going to be clearly women's decade in India also. So I think we're also investing through whatever we can into a CSR focusing on women empowerment, both off and on-farm based products. So that's what we're focusing on. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sunil Bhatt. I joined Rajarshi from Microsafe Consulting. So we are a financial inclusion consulting firm, and apart from many other projects that we do in financial inclusion, we work on a couple of large projects which support women enterprises. And in addition to access to finance, well, I understand that's the focus today, but in addition to access to finance, there are a couple of other things which are required if businesses have to grow. So we wanted to share a little bit more on that as well. So looking forward to the discussion.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ashir and I lead strategic initiatives at Grameen Foundation India. And our organization works with the mission of enabling the low income, especially women, to create a world without poverty and hunger. My ticket to this event, we started a program this year funded by, supported by JP Morgan on building investment readiness of 300 women-owned small businesses. This is particularly making women-owned small businesses scale from your typical microfinance segment to the core banking segment. Besides this, we have a network of, we built a network of 2,300 women entrepreneurs spread across about 19 districts and 4 states. These are women entrepreneurs from local communities providing financial and non-financial services at the last mile. And this is done through our social business, Grameen Impact Ventures. And along with this, we have another program in collaboration with the Gates Foundation on building viability for BC agents. The focus is on a large section of about 12% of the 3.2 million BC agents in India who are also entrepreneurs, increasing their viability, enabling them to able to scale their business, and also working with the supply side partners in mainstreaming the gender aspect, where we are working with them on change management and other aspects, and increasing their coverage for BC agents, as well as improving the customer service for women across these BC points. Thank you.
Yeah, so Microsoft partners with the Grameen Foundation on this.
Okay, hi, I'm Susan. I don't know my ticket here, but when you're talking about women, then definitely we are very interested. I work with Industry Foundation, which was founded in 2000, and we work very closely with rural women. We take work to them instead of displacing them to come into cities and leave their families behind. So we work on a kind of a 6C model. We do a construct, that means we aggregate the women, then we build their capacity on the product that they make and go forward. Then you have the channel, we connect them to relevant markets, international and national. We just don't connect, and we don't just want to replicate a product, so we bring in create, which is design, we bring in that. And for all this, we also need the capital, so that's the other C. The last but not the least, and the most important right now in this day and age, is the connect, the digital connect. So when we take women from the rural background, from whatever comfort zone they are in, we don't want them to slip back into what they were, into the poverty. So we see that their hands, the machines, we have 4 producer-owned companies, under which we have about 35 mutually benefit trusts, where the producers, the artisans, are the directors. So we don't want them to ever stop earning. So that's where we give them the market connect. So basically, we are trying to take these women further into a future where they are independent, they have a good identity. They also do not forget that they are the mother, the wife, the daughter, or whatever there is. Like when Rupali shares, she is still with the family. She is talking about the family, which is so good. And for us, if the next generation sees the woman, sees the mother getting into these things and saying that, my mother is earning with respect, and that she's doing something on her own, that's when India, we feel, will take the next step. So I'm glad to be here.
Thank you, everyone. So jumping right in, I think, Saurav highlighted, we are really looking to solve for access to finance. So if I can invite some of the financial, institution representatives to share how you're approaching lending to women-led enterprises from a portfolio perspective, as well as, any innovative products and services that you may have, or even channels that you're using to reach out to these enterprises that address some of the challenges that we know. There's lack of data, there are issues with underwriting, the costs may be high. So, what are some of those products, if you can speak to that? So Manish, if we can start with you, and then I request maybe Shachi, Sumit, Rupa, and Matilda to come in on this.
Thanks. As I said, the way we have created Avanti is more on 3 pillars, which is paperless, presenceless, cashless is what we call. So it's completely digital, works in assisted mode in rural India. And all the bells, whistles, all the things, regulatory verifications, validations are built into that assisted part of it, of the journey. The second part of it is the presenceless, when we work with multiple partners. So currently we work with 65 plus partners. Seva is one. Seva is one of them, and multiple organizations of Seva that we partner with. Industry is another where we work with one of the collectives that we have financed. So multiple partners that we work with. Even the Internet Sati program of Google, where we actually use the BCs were the ones sourcing loans for us. The entire, as I said, what we try and do is how do we, what Diksha talked about, data which being a problem. While we have the only data point which most banks underwrite on is the formal bureau reports that one gets, and today let's say almost 65 to 70% hit rate is what we get. Even in rural cases, in urban it will be much higher. But there are still 30, 35 which are do not have that formal financial data. Plus even what we have seen, at least 28 to 30% of our portfolio goes to women who are high risk or very high risk as per the bureau standards, which typically again formal financial services do not really support. And most of them fall into that category mainly because of some episodical events. It's not really a willingness or that kind of issue, but more because a local event, a drought, a COVID, and various things that have happened, and it's for them it's a regular thing which happens. So how do we still get them back into being lendable by the formal financial services? And that's where we use work with partners where they provide us additional data points. So besides the formal data points that we go into, so organizations like Seva, very interesting social information that they provide where, where they provide very different data points like ये बहन के घर पे आदमी नशा करता है, उसको लोन नहीं देना चाहिए. And so what we do is we empower the partners really to provide a recommendation or a rejection for us to take a final decision on. The involvement of the partner, and we work with multiple kind of partners. There are NGOs that we work with. We work with cooperatives and collectives. So FPOs become our borrowers because they are also a part of the unbanked or underbanked category, because again formal financial services do not reach them, but they also become our partners to provide loans to the members of the FPOs based on that this is the land, this is what they are growing, and we will be buying it from them, and therefore this is the kind of income that they will generate. So that information is over and above, as I said, the formal financial information which helps in terms of underwriting. They also help in terms of digitizing the footprints of the borrowers, because we have built the entire ecosystem for cashless, where there are e-collect accounts and any app, anything can be used for paying directly into it. It's real-time seen into, they get SMSs. So we also, in situ literacy is, according to us, is far more impactful than pure just literacy. I mean, the CGTs and MRTs that microfinance has been used to need to now go into more in situ literacy. We have had a very different kind of our first pilot was with Seva in Katihar and Bihar, and we actually, in a way, I mean, I will use the words forced. We gave loans to 36 women, but forced them, and it was a weekly repayment, forced them to make payment only and only through bank transfers.
Sorry to cut you, Manish. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we'll come back to this point. But
Okay.
I'll request, I think the bank representative, maybe you. Sumit. And Rupa.
RBL is here. I'm happy to take and maybe share some. So purely speaking from CSR, and of course representing a bank, I won't talk about what we are doing from purely business side, but how the CSR is supporting. One of the learnings that, and I'll share an anecdote, and this should support the question that you were asking. One of the things that we felt that an obvious lead up to
if you've looked at a project from 2017 into, developing women entrepreneurs, training them into, fast-moving fashion and, homemade products. And I'm breaking it to really simple approach here so that it's understandable across. We felt that, obviously that now it should lead to, when we looked at it more dispassionately, that this should lead to now an e-com business. And we must support and fund creatively in any way, capacity through CSR. And we did try to figure out, and we did it also. But what we could not figure out is that, already saying it in a way that it doesn't hurt the sentiment, but when a social enterprise which is purely organized to do business, and then versus I experienced through how a non-profit would approach it, was so different. And of course, all of us have watched Shark Tank in India, right? We've learned how e-com works. I'm sure some of you know it better than me. And I realized that, the scale was an issue. So was the whole vision around it. We still believe in, developing that e-com for them. So I think if I have to keep my answer short, we are trying to look at, can this now connect from purely a, CSR project now to a full-fledged enterprise? And I think the bridge in itself is so difficult for us to cross. Not that, capacity is in there, capability is in there, but I think from, both from demand and supply side and, the way enterprise is also understood, again, it's purely from CSR. If I just connect this whole piece, take it to a lender, take it to a bank, and I think it simplifies in terms of, providing working capital and ensuring that, this is built. But when I look at project from CSR, I think the first instinct that comes is that, am I okay for it to fail? There was another project that I had met an SDO through one of the aspirational district. She was very clear to me that we want to do this tamarind and sal making plant, a little production center. But the problem is investments are not coming because it's bound to fail. And are we okay with that? So I'll just stop here.
So how we have gone about doing this? Because we had experience in the regular microfinance space, and what we observed was people are actually transitioning from group-led financing. They want individual loans, and banks don't do that because of the problems that you mentioned: lack of data, lack of ability to assess, and all of that. So while people have started doing that, they have incurred huge losses because COVID has also happened in that this thing, and now people are withdrawing a few loans that they had already given there. So an interesting experiment which has worked for IndusInd well is what we have done is we started with a small pilot about 2-3 years ago, but now we have selected certain industries like tailoring, beauty parlor, grocery shops, and things like that. And we have adopted a liability-focused lending model where we ask them first to open an account with us because the khata, etc., is not properly maintained. And then they put money into our account, 500 rupees or so on a weekly basis. And we study that whether the shop is able to shop or the small business owner is able to consistently put 500 rupees every week into the, so it gives a size estimate because he has obviously kept some money for his expenditure, etc. And then after studying it for about 3 to 4 months, then we start lending to that. Of course, there's also a physical check. We insist that there is a pakka shop, not a WhatsApp business model and all of that. So some criteria is laid and we've started lending. So now we've got a book of close to 3,000 crores on such kind of small, so that we are extending. And then to get more people who are not yet having the digital footprint of their income, which means if they are not recording their income anywhere, it's all in cash income, etc. Michael and Susan Dell Foundation did a small project with Revive where they enabled these small shops to buy this POS and record their sales through that. Now that data, they have done it during this COVID period. That data Revive has shared with IndusInd Bank, And now we have taken a pilot out of them. These are first time to taking any loans. They've never taken any loans before. That was a grant that Michael and Susan Dell gave them. And now we have contacting them to see whether we can lend to them. If this is successful, we will then scale up. I've contacted Grameen also, because many of them have these businesses right now. And we've also then reached out to these SnapBiz and all these kind of businesses who actually provide a digital, machinery and, the infrastructure by which these small women, of course, in these cases, I've seen that broadly 50 to 60% of the shops are women-owned. Some are, so it depends upon the choice of industries. Certain industries, like a beauty parlor, is typically 90% owned by women, not by male. So like that, if you choose certain industries which have more women, garments, fashion, beauty, all these things are handicrafts, are more women-owned, then you have a higher woman bias. That's how our approach has been.
A couple of thoughts which come to my mind, just looking at it from the bank's bank's point of view is, so our learning, all of this is evolving over the last 10 years, right? So in the RBL example, the first time the bank the bank did a CSR funding was to a skilling program, because that's the easy, you feel that you'll get your return on investment, right? That you're making there. And that was to Atul Industries, which was basically teaching girls to stitch, right? And they would start then getting employed in the factories around and start stitching, basically doing straight stitching, right? We learned two things through that program when we funded that. That first of all, there was no employability for them beyond these factories. Because all they learned, because of the pressures of the programs and the outcome, was to learn straight stitches, right? And also these girls got married and they moved on. So this just went for a thing. To where Sumit narrated the story about developing an e-commerce. So this is like 5-6 years back where we learned this lesson and we said, now whatever we support, we have to make sure that the forward linkage needs to be there. And the skilling needs to be of a quality, because we were focusing on peri-urban, right, which is part of the report also, Saurabh, that JP Morgan has funded on this. We said we need to train them to a sensibility which appeals to the urban people, because their market is going to come from there. So this is such a image which comes to my mind whenever I think of my learning in this. That I went to the village and I saw the stitching that they were doing, and I saw they made a beautiful kurta, but the inseam was so much. Nobody in the city is going to wear it like that, right? And there's so much of the cloth going waste. So I sat there and through my Instagram, I started showing them designs, right? And said, look, this is how these things are happening. So the first thing which happened with women, and I think Rupali, while she's doing instruments, etc., through the Mandeshi program also, was to get them into a immersion of what sells. What sells? What is it that you will buy? So some of the work that we did was then to invite them into our offices, to come and put small stalls, because their production is not so much. To say, ye acha hai, ye acha nahi hai. I'll buy this, I won't buy this, kind of a thing. So I think working with women entrepreneurs, this whole thing of, Mandeshi does a very good job of getting women entrepreneurs whose aspiration is very strong. That's half the battle won. Because Rupali will find a way no matter what happens. She got access to finance. That's the second thing. And a lot of you are working on that area, so that's also coming in. But the goods to be of a quality, which somebody will buy, which will give them the profit, is something that at least corporate CSRs look for, because your agenda is transformation. How will transformation happen if you're selling something for 100 rupees and you've invested 60 rupees in it? Right? So you need to be selling it So those are some of the points that I want to add from a corporate CSR point of view, that funding becomes difficult if you don't see the transformation agenda and the lessons that we've learned.
Industry also does a good job.
Yeah.
Industry.
Yeah, come in.
Yeah, because.
I loved your 7 Cs.
Yeah, 6
6
Cs.
Cs, sorry.
Yeah. No, so, when I listen to all of you, it's not just the funding for the moment. Yeah, now to get the quality, this woman has to be trained at least for 3 to 4 months. What happens during the 3 to 4 months? How is she going to keep earning? Because we have had women who come and do the training, but after which they say, we are not going to be sitting here for free, because then I might as well go to the field, I might as well go to the BD thing, even though I know it's going to hurt my health. So when the banks are looking at this, do you consider that, I come from the marketing side, yeah, so I'm here, that's my colleague who's on the funding side, and we always have this fight saying that, in the marketing, in the create side, you need to have time, because definitely nobody is going to buy something which is substandard in quality, and nobody is going to buy something I want for Christmas if you give it to me in Easter. So those are the things. And I don't want to be sitting in a room where your roof is going to fall, your wires are hanging here and there. Those are basics. So when we ask a funder and they say that, ROI has to be the next month, how? How can you? So that's my point here, when you say that, that there has to be a return, and we give a project saying that it's a minimum of 6 months. We work in the banana field, we work with the bamboo now, we work with Salsiali, we work with apparel and embroidery. Everywhere, the training period is not less than 3 months. What do we do for those 3 months? So if we are approaching somebody, that if you consider that, then calculate your ROI. And your ROI is not immediate. Any corporate office takes at least 3 years to turn around. Why do we expect a MSME to turn around in 1 month? Why?
We did, I'm sorry I'm interjecting here, we did try to scope an opportunity of revolving fund using CSR fund, but I think we were shot down neatly while it could or could not work through CSR, but we did try to experiment through that. But
Shot down by regulations?
Yes, if I politely put it.
There are several other departments.
If we can just get another perspective, so Sarita, if you can, speak from the philanthropy side of things, how do you approach this? Because I think what we're also hearing is there are so many pilots. Across the table, we are all part of pilots. And, scale is, of course, a question, and we'll come to that, when we look at funding as well. So are we looking at philanthropy from the perspective of, funding pilots, and then we look at other capital to scale, or, are there other roles for philanthropic funding as well? But if we can have your perspective.
No, so I just want to share an example of what we are doing at Malegaon. We work with women and giving them entrepreneurship leadership training. How do you really become entrepreneurs and run a business? And what was identified was, almost every house had goats. And goat milk was easily available. And they said, we want to make soap and other products of goat milk. Great. Well, how will you sell them? Who's going to buy? Right? And that's the challenge. Right? So I think the only way we are looking is, can we make it popular within that village and locality first? So market it right in that state, that district, and then look at taking it up. So for us, the marketing piece is a real big challenge. I don't think we lack the drive to get women to become entrepreneurs, but it's what next. The capital is there, but what now? How do you sustain that kind of entrepreneurial drive to get them going? So the other piece then we looked at, can we train them into skills which are not so very popular, other than, of course, the papad, pickle and whatsoever. So we have now taken a group of 60 girls from Raichur, which is an aspirational district, training them to be assistant pharmacist. Right, and getting them to be associated with pharmacy shops, because there they can get, but that also is first based on a scan. Is there an opportunity? And I think that's one thing I want to say. When you do some program, especially from a corporate side, I think we need to understand, is there a demand before we get into it and try to see. And it's tough to convince, honestly. It's tough to convince because we don't see the demand piece coming even from the partners who don't do that scan. And then we don't see the marketing plan going right up to the last stage. So I think a lot of push is required. Or I think push is the wrong word, but a collaborative approach where maybe our brains can work and support them in developing some plans, and they can come up with some ground realities for us and say this is the way to proceed. My 2 cents.
Right. I think we're also hearing a lot on how access to, while we are solving for access to finance, it's not enough, and that's something that came up in our research as well, that, you know, if you complement it with training, then the entire product is more effective. So how do you bundle some of these services? So maybe if we can hear from some of the incubators who are working in this space as well, how do you approach this, you know, both from funding, and what are some of the other areas that are critical that will help the enterprise absorb the capital, probably, you know, convert it and look at that maybe 10x impact.
Yeah. So at Upaya we do equity and quasi-equity into small and medium enterprises. So most of them, I think, the observation that I've been hearing is the market linkage, which is a very critical component for most of the micro enterprises or nano enterprises or entrepreneurs like Rupali. And the other big piece is, you know, how do you, you know, absorb the shock when it is not there. You know, beautiful skills are built out based on the CSR money and the philanthropic money. And that's what I feel our enterprises are doing the best, which is they engage with a lot of micro and nano enterprises and absorb that and give that market linkage. To give an example, a company called Maniksu in Orissa work with the landless women farmers who rear goat. Now, where do you sell the goat? Whether can you ethically get the price that these women wanted? That's what Maniksu is doing. Similarly, a company called Sirohi, which is in Muzaffarnagar, work with a lot of women artisans who can make furniture out of waste materials. And now they take the front end part, which is your likes of Amazon or online selling. So the capacity is built. Now, how do you pass that benefit to the women artisan? And that's where Upaya's role come in to say that whether the impact that has been created in the back end is taken care of, and whether the nano enterprises are really benefiting out of it. So we are putting money in all the enterprises model where they're able to aggregate homepreneurs or micro entrepreneurs and then help involve. And that helps with my first point that I said, because 50% of our enterprises are women-led, we believe in the thesis that it can create more jobs among the women job holders. So in a way, I see a great collaboration with all of you who spoke about the market linkage piece. You know, lot of them can involve with most of our portfolio company. We'll be very happy to take a very active engagement. Yeah, that's my sense. So Upaya incepted in 2011. The Microsoft network at Seattle, the diaspora is our sort of supporting base. LinkedIn, Alan Blue is also behind us, yeah.
So it's essentially philanthropic money.
It's all philanthropic
It's
money.
not investor money.
Correct, but it's invested as, yeah.
If philanthropic money comes like this, then it can be leveraged
Correct.
for commercial capital.
That's what we are doing. We call it recyclable philanthropy, so that this returns that we are getting is recycled. Yeah.
Is it derived like that?
If we are able to lend on it, that is yet to be tested.
Just a quick follow-up question was in terms of that I get it that you're saying is essentially the entrepreneurs you support may be bigger, but they are kind of aggregating the nano entrepreneurs and therefore building the, or
That's
just wanted
correct.
to be clear on the size of the entrepreneurs that you fund.
So these
I
are
don't think
companies, when they come to us, they themselves are doing somewhere around 5 to 10 lakh, all the way up to 3 crore per month. That's the size that they come from. Once they take our equity and quasi-equity, they build up the space. So any company that, for example, Maniksu Agro, the company that I said that working with goat farmers, currently they are engaging with 1,000 odd farmers right now.
so. It's a good way to aggregate and therefore be
Correct.
able to.
Yeah.
So that's a not-for-profit or it's a for-profit?
No, these are all for-profit enterprises, for-profit.
Producer or some social enterprise.
Correct. These are all not farmer producer company because these are for-profit enterprises creating their own base. But when they find enabling organization like many of yours,
But are they women-owned?
yes, the enterprises are women. Not the nano enterprises
So
of
the
the last
mile
mile.
is women,
Correct. Yeah.
not the aggregators.
Not the, no, the aggregator is women, I'm saying, it's vice versa. Yeah, yeah. We segregate, yeah, yeah, correct.
Which is a woman.
Correct.
So when we were scouting for the women entrepreneurs for our cohort in Feb, I was actually quite reminded of the JP Morgan CREA report that talks about the fact that a very small component of women entrepreneurs actually build scalable businesses. A lot of them tend to be home-based entrepreneurs and maybe hire 0 people or 1 people. And out of the 150 women social entrepreneurs who applied, and these are for-profit women social entrepreneurs, I think almost 80% of them were mompreneurs, like the home-based thing, right? And we figured out what's the problem, right? The thing is that, of course, I think supply side of money is fine. The question is demand side, the acceptance of risk. And it's interesting, I actually read a book recently, a little controversial book called Of Boys and Men. It's written about the fact that men in the US are losing their traditional status, right? Because what happens is that up till even, let's say, 70 years ago, the traditional role was the man's a provider, the woman is a nurturer, and that, of course, luckily is changing. But what's happening there is that a lot of men who were providers saying, hey, now, okay, we're not nurturing, we're not providing, why do we exist, right? Which, again, I'm not getting into the whole red-blue divide, but the point is that there's a certain underlying thing there. But when I look at a lot of the women entrepreneurs that came to us and said, okay, why don't you start raising more capital for your own business, right? They said, look, the problem is that, my business is always subservient to the larger family, right? The thing is that, okay, fine, forget about the fact I've got family requirements, things like that, but my husband can take a loan against assets for his business. I can't take a loan against my family's assets. I may not even have assets in my name. Number one. Number two, let's say the judgment of failure for the woman is much higher than, a guy can raise money and say, okay, I lost my money, good. A woman can't do that. And also don't forget is that very often a lot of scalable businesses, most of your initial funding comes from friends and family, right? How many family members or let's say even friends of the women say, okay, yeah, here's my money to help you start a business. So the thing is that, so of course you guys are supporting scalable women entrepreneurs, but to get the larger number of women mompreneurs to actually move into scalable businesses, I think there are 2 things. One is I think, and this is something that we're also looking at, can we start some sort of education thing to actually start educating the family that, look, your like the woman, the mother or the daughter actually has a viable business that is worth supporting even with risk capital. That means taking family risk or family assets and supporting that business, number one. Number two, and this is, I think the other thing is that even teaching women that risk is good. Very risk averse, right? And it's because there's not an environment that is risk taking. A guy can take risk, but women can't here. So I think if we're able to manage that risk acceptance, then you may actually see a lot more women entrepreneurs then building scalable business and then accessing the finance that is so generously available, it seems.
It's a question of changing mindsets with women itself.
Exactly. And the family, you can't just do it.
Would love to work with you in this space, and I agree, it's all here, right?
Well, if you come and talk to our women group because I want to get them to start scaling up.
Sanjana, you can come in on the West program because Seva is also working on supporting.
All right. So at Seva Bharat, there's a pilot program we started about 3 years ago. We've now named it the Women's Enterprise Support System. Across the Seva movement over 50 years, various Seva institutions have incubated and promoted cooperatives. Now the cooperative movement has had its success and failures across different states. We know it's a tricky model. But Seva Bharat, that was tasked with the job of taking the Seva movement outside Gujarat, not only continued its unionizing and mobilizing work with women, that was cross-cutting across various sectors. It also believes, and still today still believes, that one of the strongest pathways for women's economic empowerment is through collectivizing via enterprises. What we've noticed is cooperatives don't work. Producer companies are the new hybrid version. There is definitely more success there. It's easier to manage. But still, we see that because they're producers, they're grassroots women, they have limited capabilities. Unko apna kaam aata hai. They know what to do. You can build their capacity with a few months, sometimes a little more than 3 or 4, but they will learn their job. But there are many challenges they face. They don't have technical skills of bookkeeping. They don't understand where to go to get money. They don't know how to think of marketing, quality, inconsistency in production. There are a lot of other issues that I think we've experienced. And so this support hub was built. what we call the West, was built to kind of iron out some of these issues. We started with the pilot cohort of 5 enterprises. It's 2 credit cooperatives, 1 farmer producer company in Bihar, 1 artisan producer company in Delhi, 1 BC company in Uttarakhand and Punjab. So we were very spread out. But we picked this because we were experimenting. We fully acknowledge that there will be failures in this process. Some things didn't work out. We shut some of the initial enterprises that we were working with because we realized they just were not viable. But we've learned some very basic things. One is that women know their work, and you work with them, they will improve their quality of work. But they have limited capabilities. You can build their capacity to govern their enterprise and make good decisions for themselves as farmers or as producers or even as staff members of the enterprise and as board of directors. But after one point, because of the competitive nature of the market, and now with all the digital advancements and e-com being such a big role in the market, that's not a space they feel comfortable with. At the same time, but because they're part of a collective enterprise, there is more space for negotiation with the family because they're not working alone. The risk is not theirs. So when we built WES and over 50 years of Seva, I think we've realized that when you get women together and you tell them they'll work together, some of them can be home-based, some of them will come to a production center, there are different enterprises that work different ways. One is the family then has a little more faith that, अच्छा वहाँ पे जा रही है, बहुत महिलाएं हैं वहाँ पे, there's a safe space to come back, the woman's not going to run away, पता नहीं क्या हो जाएगा, you know, all those things that they usually believe women could possibly get up to, but that is resolved. But what Wes realized is these enterprises hit a place where they're not able to scale, or forget scale. Scale is difficult for women in the grassroots. It's also not their preference because care responsibilities will never go away from their life. I'm sorry, but with the women I work with, care is not shifting. Care is still our responsibility. We work so heavily, and women are always going to be primary caretakers of their family. Elderly, child, as well as health of everyone in the family, right? So that doesn't go away. So Wes then started to think of what can we do to just crack the business model. And we set up a bunch of interventions and experiments with these 5 enterprises. And there are a few things we realize are core. One is we have an internal team that works with the enterprises to clean out their finance and compliances. If you don't have good bookkeeping and you're not compliant by law, you're not going to be able to get access to loans of any sort. And you're definitely not going to be able to access schemes, which collective enterprises don't have any formal funding sources. They are very heavily reliant on schemes and philanthropic money. That's also a challenge in the collective model. The second thing that we realized is they need access to professionals who can do the thinking. So what industry does in terms of marketing and the creation piece, Wes had to connect these enterprises to industry experts. We work with Microsave and our BC company. We work with Ruti with our FPO. So we consider ourselves a bridge. So that's what we did. We partner up and we say, can we get in the right technical knowledge and voices in to help these women think better and work better. The third is that they needed professionals to play the role of managers. So they can be on their board of governors, their board of directors, but they still need a CEO. They need someone to think about social media. They need someone to think about production and supply chain. And these are things that they can't do. So something we realized in the West is how can we get these inputs in? So, and at the same time, communications and branding and all of that became core. If you want to keep an enterprise alive and for them not to be looked at, because there is a bias against grassroots women. You think of them as SHGs. Every time I talk about Seva, oh, you work with SHGs. No, we work with formally registered enterprises. These are all governed either by the MCA or the cooperative department, but they have to file taxes, they have to submit, and a credit cooperative has like 500 compliances it has to keep up with. So this is very challenging for grassroots women. And I think in this experiment, what we've tried to see is what are these different inputs we can provide. Some of them have worked. We've embedded young people, because these are also rural, a lot of them are rural, semi-urban locations. A lot of youngsters don't want to stay for too long. So rotation in the leadership becomes a challenge as well, and we're still learning as we go along this. But these are some of the basics that you have to fix. Good finance, decent, like properly compliant by law, access to technical sectoral experts, and professional integration into the system. Now, how you do it, models are different. I've heard so many examples. I know all of you can speak to it. But there's some things that you can't change is that for us, the reason why the collective model is so important is because it enables for the woman not to believe the risk is hers. That's one. Second, a lot of these women do this work, as per the report, you call it subsistence, which is just their livelihood. The only thing is the enterprise. A lot of them might not be entrepreneurial in nature. Like Rupali Taiji is entrepreneurial in nature. She said, मैं अपने दम पे करूँगी, मैं किसी से पैसा नहीं लूँगी. Some of these women don't have an option. They have to work because they need. It doesn't always.
Only for this there is a problem. For the
No. For the higher tickets. Yeah, but these are very small enterprises. Some of these won't be able to leverage all of that, and the only options they do have are things like centrally sponsored schemes, 10K, or they have Nav Kisan. But they're very few. There are not many options, and they can't get equity in, which is also a challenge. And when you can't get equity in, then you think of blended finance like models. But blended finance, because of regulatory challenges, you'll have to bring in through an NGO, and there's an investment equity component, and that will only come through the NGO. And when you get it through a CSO or an NGO, then there is the business model versus NGO model, which is where we struggle. So what Saurabh was talking about, which is when you take a CSR program and try to translate it into an enterprise, we've worked with Oxfam on our FPO. And it went from a capacity building program around good practices in agriculture. So we worked with women farmers, and from 5,000 trained farmers, we converted into a FPO of 700 odd farmers. We still see the struggle from the not-for-profit to for-profit. That's the thing that we're still trying to figure out, is that you might have managers in place, and once you have managers in place, they can drive the need to build upon all of these pieces. But that's a gap I think a lot of people are still struggling with, is how do you take a woman from being a producer, not to assume that she'll become an entrepreneur. Not every woman that's in this space is an entrepreneur. First of all, that's very important to understand. You're funding enterprises, and an enterprise can be run by a board which is just looking after its form of livelihood. So that's, again, the piece that this space needs to think about. Definitely regulatory and policy changes that are required. At the same time, there's a space for a lot of collaboration that can happen, but how do you sustain that collaboration? A lot of these enterprises can't afford to pay highly skilled professionals. So we're very reliant on philanthropic money to come in to do that. But that might be the only way for a while until they're able to actually crack it, become profitable, get some formal source of funding in some way, some or the other, to prove that then they can pay for these professionals. So there are those gaps that also need to be fixed.
I think that's a good seg to, what we really also want to focus on. Given the context that, we've all laid out, how do we use philanthropic funds and, get the maximum impact? Are there specific sectors we should focus on, or there are certain segments or sub-segments, or are we looking at it more from, building the ecosystem, de-risking, and so on? So I'd like to invite Arvindan, to speak to this as well, and then we can, if you had to think of a wish list probably for philanthropy, and, how do we look at this? So what would be on your wish list? How should it be structured?
Yeah, no, very interesting conversations, and I think it's taking me back to when we were doing the research, right? Some of these really came up. I think one is very clearly, I think the role of philanthropy is critical, but it shouldn't be one of repurposing, right? It shouldn't be the same money that is going into skilling is now going into subsidizing or being concessional capital to somebody else. So it has to be additional funding that actually creates this. So that's, I think, very important to keep in mind, because even as CSR money comes in, there needs to be a separate focus on actually making what you're saying, this market transformation happen. The second part is, it is very, very critical to understand the difference between the enterprise and the entrepreneur in this entire process. We are now in the midst of putting together a $25 million pool fund that is looking at various aspects of women's economic empowerment, which includes different pathways, including care economy, right? Like, how do you create a care economy that will enable a more mind space and more risk taking? It looks at direct economic participation, a lot of other things. I think the role of philanthropy in such funds to actually aggregate some of these pilots that are happening to come together and match it with some of the the market capital. I think that would be one other powerful area where we feel like maybe there is a chance for us to collaborate better. I do think that some of the challenges we've been hearing for a while now, and some of the actors are also quite common. Most of us know each other across the table as well. What would be useful is, and I would like to hear from all of you saying, look, if we all know what needs to be done, what is holding us back from moving forward? What is that one ask that we are struggling with that we cannot do from within the confines of how we operate, our regulatory constraints, our stakeholder constraints? What is that one ask that will enable us to make the transition? I think that is where philanthropy can be a very catalytic mover in that process. And maybe that's something that, you know, as AVPN, we want to continue this conversation and move forward as well, right? So maybe that's the structuring that we can also try and create from some of the people who have the consulting background into the access, but also the community background into what makes this transition work. So that's where I would leave it. Yeah.
I'd also like to invite maybe Ashi and then the Microsafe team. I think you also have a foundation perspective, and Grameen itself has so many ventures structured in different ways. So how do you look at this?
We are an implementing organization through and through. So, I agree with most of the points that Seva Bharat made over here. From a wish list perspective, I think more investments in training, capacity building. I think let's go down to the basics and talk about business skills. I think from a structural perspective, I think there was a conscious effort when we were designing the program that now JP Morgan is supporting, was going down to the very basics of whom we are targeting. Is it self-employed or is it a business? Two very, very separate things. Is it registered? Is it unregistered? And then creating its typical program design and structure based on core enterprise developments, pure business skills. We have found things like, digitization of payments. If a woman does not have a bank account in her own name, what credit are we talking about? There's no CIBIL check. There's no trail of what today the banking sector has evolved to cash flow based lending, credit checks and the risk assessment part. This is where we are at present. So which target segment are we looking at? So a lot of dedicated support towards building business capacity. I think bits and pieces were covered in terms of market linkage or finance and customer servicing and other parts. But then who is that one person who sits probably in a bank account or in a bank branch like IndusInd? You can probably place a person over there who once gets rejected by the branch manager because they don't have a project documentation, just goes to that person saying, can you please help me? Writing a project document is one of the most toughest things, when you create something like a DPR for a 50,000 rupees Kirana store, what inventory will you buy for 50,000 rupees that gives you a return on investment? Just things as simple as that. We are working with Avanti in lending as a digital lending partner now for women entrepreneurs. What we are finding over there is, one, geolocation helps a lot, because that also helps build a social capital and understanding what is the social capital base of the woman entrepreneur over there. Secondly is also because you're doing on lending, having digital having women entrepreneurs as BC agents as well, they are able to gauge how effective this person is in terms of repayment and other things. The risk appetite kind of happens. Third, I think, is also the fact that the purpose of the thing. We designed a program for Mandeshi Bank, a product actually, which is called a GOAT loan. It is 6 months of savings, then you take the loan, 3 months moratorium, and 50% repayment on the first day of the 4th month. We gave about 158 loans, a ticket size of total of 23 lakhs, which comes down to about 14,000 rupees per loan. It saw a 150% increase in savings of the woman entrepreneur. But that was designed from, one, the gender lens, but second, from a self-employment lens and not a business lens. So, over and above, I think some of these things do come up. Fourth, I think, is gender disaggregated data on lending is a wish list that an implementing agency like us would love to have. It is very important for us to understand who are our women borrowers, what are they facing as challenges, and which segment. Today we have 2.77 crore Mudra accounts who are women, but there is also an entire microfinance segment, 12 crores, of which at least 95% are women, of which about 60 to 70% of them use those loans for self-employment opportunities. So gender disaggregated is where. Fourth, last point, Northern Arc has done a very interesting job now in creating something called as the NEO score, where they did 25 years panel time series data of their entire portfolio and the people whom they have lent to, in understanding where is the credit shock happening. And having access to that in a very cost-effective manner, and using that in the project budget itself, having that component will be greatly helpful, because that is where you begin your journey. Once you understand what is the credit risk of the woman entrepreneur herself, then you build upon that. Investment readiness and business performance are two separate things, and while we do that, it's important to understand credit risk, and it's slightly difficult at this stage to get this from a formal banking sector, but it will be very, very useful from an implementation perspective. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashi. Sunil, if I can ask you to come in as well.
I'll be very, very brief. Most of you have covered a lot of points. So Microsave is doing a project funded by MedLife Foundation, and the focus is on 3 countries, India, Vietnam, and Nepal, largely for women enterprises. So while the focus is on access to finance, and Seva is also one of the partners, so we are working with Seva Cooperative Federation. So we have a few partners here, and we conducted research to understand what can be more effective, because credit is only one part of it. So what we observed is that in addition to training, in addition to access to finance, training and capacity building is one of the key elements, right? And there could be multiple elements of it, and a lot of you covered that as well. So registration, like business registration, is one of the prerequisites for access to finance. But interestingly, to give you a few numbers, we conducted this study in Telangana. So about 80% of women businesses, and I'm talking of solo entrepreneurs, people who run single women business, about 70 to 80% did not know what a Udyam registration is, right? And while it's a very, very simple process to do, but it's a prerequisite for any credit or insurance or anything. So some kind of training around that, and other aspects which some of you mentioned, like bookkeeping, marketing, inventory management. A lot of startups are also doing that as well, right? Access to finance also includes insurance as well. Like in our study, we saw 40% of women did not know what insurance is. Forget about health insurance, life insurance, shop insurance, and others. What is the concept of insurance itself was sort of unknown. And if you know the Roskas or Bishis, as they are known as, those are used as a saving tool as well as an insurance tool. So we saw that this thing. So in access to finance, one thing that we observed is how closely we are able to mimic the informal finance. So the uptake of the product is that much. So if our product is designed to keep it very close with informal lending, like a BC, so that much will be the uptake. So the more we keep it formal, the lesser will be the uptake. So that's something that we observed. The other thing is access to market. So I think that's like extremely important. And what we have seen is a lot of women entrepreneurs want to sell on Flipkart, want to sell on WhatsApp, but they need some kind of a hand-holding and some kind of training to create things like product catalogs and all that. So if we are kind of supporting them on that, I think that will be really good. And the last one is like building a healthy practice of community of practice, like COP. If you are able to do that, so that could be used to transmit information amongst themselves, because like someone said, new designs, right? I think you mentioned like new designs of clothes. So if people know that, okay, this is something that's selling, but how do they get to know? So if someone is, we teach them to upload those photographs, and if you are able to kind of have some discussion, so that will be like a very cheap way of passing on information. So if you are able to build community of practice for women in the local language itself, that kind of helps a lot.
Thank you.
Microsave and Seva Bharat have done a study on access to finance for women and individual entrepreneurs, what we call micro entrepreneurs in the Seva Bharat language, and for collective enterprises. And what we found, and also what we're actually trying to understand, is there is microfinance which caters to loans up to 3 lakhs, maybe up to 5, and then you have the formal banking system which rules out a lot of grassroots women for many reasons. There are biases because policies and banks are gender blind or gender neutral in some cases. They're not gender intentional, so they're not pushing for women, even though their products being designed left, right, center for women, not for this category of women, not for women workers in the informal economy. So what we now are saying is there's a missing middle from 3 lakhs to 55 lakhs. that individual entrepreneurs and collective enterprises need filled for working capital, to grow, for infrastructure, for all sorts of reasons, to start up and to scale, and that's not being met by anyone. And that's the segment that needs to be filled, and we're not able to. That's what I mean. When collective enterprises are trying to get financing, it's usually becoming philanthropy. So large. So this thing, right? So that's becoming but this is a gap, and the problem is most of them are in that gap because their turnovers for most individual enterprise, the turnovers, I'm talking slightly larger than WBC, but less than 10 lakhs, much smaller because some of them are like 10,000 to 75,000 rupees. And then you have collective enterprises, they're definitely less than a crore. So their capital requirements at the time and the risk they're willing to take at a time is like 5 lakhs, 15 lakhs. And then if you put that into term loans and put longer term, repayment schedule, it's very overwhelming. So I feel like that's something I would love to see. My wish list is, one is this gender disaggregated data, but also what can we do to fill in this gap. And in that study, what we also learned is that bridge institutions like Seva, Pradhan, multiple, the ones who provide support systems to help these enterprises, these women, and to apply for a loan, provide that documentation, that proposal together. If they get rejected, to go back, how to fix it. They are essential to bridging the access to finance gap. So who are the various other players and will play this role of bridge institutions, not just credit, but credit plus services are very, very important. And that's what I was talking about.
Thanks, Sanjana.
We actually work with Pradhan, and in Begusarai district, we are actually working with the FPOs and collectors. And Pradhan, we as CSR come in where we support in terms of grant funding, but we support the entire piece, right? The entire value chain. We're talking about training, training, joining, and also seed capital. So we don't directly fund the last mile women, but we through Pradhan as an institution, which is a non-profit organization. And also what is very critical is that when you're looking at, we're talking about entrepreneur, right? But when you're looking at first the skilling aspect, if you give it free, it's not valuable. Like when you're talking about the beauty parlor training, or you're talking about tailoring and different skill sets, how do we structure in a way wherein there's some skin in the game which is put in by the woman entrepreneur. She takes a loan for it, right? You get Citi, NABARD to finance that, and then when they get employment, so they will not become entrepreneur directly. Right. Tailoring, they will work in a company, and how that funding is then serviced from the salary, and they create a civil history, right? And then they can take it to the next step. So even we need to go backwards in terms of just not stepping up directly to being an entrepreneur, because we are talking about really marginalized women. They will not have the type of funding requirements that we are talking about. Right? Yes, that is a very different segment. I think that's where even Unlimited comes in. They have a test, build, grow model, right? So that's where again CSR and philanthropy comes in, where they actually support an incubator organization and they help in them the test period, and they get quasi-equity, right? Yeah. So that's where you come.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Sorry to cut you off. I'm loving the passion. I think we can continue the conversation outside. They need the room for the next. Yes. But I think since we started with Rupali Tai, it would only be appropriate if we give her the last word. Rupali Tai, आपको क्या लगता है? एक चीज़ अगर आप बोलना चाहेंगी कि ये होगा तो आप जैसे बिजनेस उद्यमी के लिए इजी होगा लोन लेना और बिजनेस करना. आपके लिस्ट पे क्या है?
जैसे मैंने भी नेशनलाइज बैंक में ट्राई किया था लोन के लिए, अप्लाई किया था. तो पहले तो मुझे बहुत बड़ा चैलेंजेस आया कि जो बैंक मैनेजर थे वो गुजरात से थे और हम महाराष्ट्र से. तो उन्होंने जिम्मेदारी लेने से ही इनकार कर दिया कि मैं गुजरात से हूँ. अरे बाप रे, मुझे लगा ये क्या है कि आप तो इतनी बड़ी पोस्ट पर हो और आप ऐसे कैसे कर सकते हो. तो उन्होंने मुझे इन्फॉर्मेशन दे दी, इतनी लंबी चौड़ी लिस्ट दे दी मुझे कि अभी मुझे उसमें से पता भी नहीं था कौन सा डॉक्यूमेंट्स कहाँ मिलता है, क्या करना है, IT रिटर्न क्या होता है, ये पता नहीं था. तो बहुत सारी ऐसी महिलाओं का प्रॉब्लम भी है कि वो इजी होता है लेकिन उनको पता नहीं रहता है कि मैं ये डॉक्यूमेंट्स लेने के लिए कहाँ पर जाऊँ. जैसे कि अभी उद्यम आधार क्या होता है बहुत सारी महिलाओं को पता नहीं. वो तो इजीली निकल जाता है. मुझे भी, अभी मैंने भी निकाला है, IT रिटर्न निकाला है, लेकिन उनको ये प्रॉपर नॉलेज नहीं होता. और कोई भी ऐसा इंफॉर्मेशन देने वाला जो बैंक में ही हमें उपलब्ध हो जाए तो बहुत अच्छी तरह से महिलाओं को जो छोटा मोटा बिजनेस करने वाली महिला है उनको इजीली लोन मिल जाएगा. थैंक यू.
I would like to add one point with reference to what can I have the mic, please? Yeah, starting from the scratch, as because I was about to take the example of Rupali ji only. Is she- Okay, yeah, sure. I was about to. Okay, तो मैं इनका ही एग्जांपल लूँगी. जैसे हमारा आज का टॉपिक यही था कि कैसे उनको वी कैन इनेबल, मतलब उनको कैसे एक्सेस दे. नाउ इनके जैसे इन्होंने अपनी स्ट्रगल का बताया ना, इफ़ वी कैन जस्ट गिव इट अ लिटिल थॉट, उनके माइंड में क्या आया होगा. इन्होंने ये सोचा कि मुझे जो है वो ये इतना फंड का अमाउंट चाहिए, मैं किसी पे डिपेंड नहीं रहना चाहती एंड आई वांट टू. और इन्होंने एक स्ट्रगल ऐसा बताया अपना जिसमें एक को पे करने के लिए उनको दूसरा लेना पड़ा. करेक्ट है. सो इफ़ एज शी मैंशनड, अभी उन्होंने एंड नोट पे यही बोला कि अगर उसको मैनेज करने का, इफ़ वी जस्ट प्रोवाइड द प्लेटफॉर्म के ठीक है क्रेडिट तो दे दिया एट वन लेवल, बट हाउ टू मैनेज दैट फाइनेंस, वो दैट कैन बी अ गेम चेंजर for such, small scale and, solopreneurs we say. So that is just to
Thank you so much. If you're interested, we'd love to share the report with you. It's on the website and the website.
Will you circulate a list of the participants online or something like that? Will you help us do that?
Out of the 150 women social entrepreneurs who applied,